My name is Evelyn Shaw. I showed up to my 20-year high school reunion wearing a plain grey wrap dress and flats. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just safe. Just enough. I arrived 15 minutes early, mostly out of habit. I've spent the last decade living by countdowns, briefings, and time hacks. Civilian life hasn't quite broken that out of me yet. The check-in table was draped in navy blue and manned by a woman young enough to be someone's intern. She looked up from her list and asked, "Eva Shaw?" I was about to correct her when she glanced at my name tag and handed it over, already laminated and printed. "Here you go," she said brightly. "You're Harper's sister, right?" I took the badge. It read Eva Shaw, Harper's sister, clear as day, sealed in plastic like it was permanent. I nodded. No use correcting her. Not about the name. Not about the fact that I graduated with honours from this school. Not about the fact that I was in this very graduating class. Same year. Same teachers. Same everything. But in this room, apparently, I was just someone else's footnote. The gym had been redone since 2005. Same bones, though. Basketball hoops retracted into the ceiling. String lights zigzagging across the room. Round tables with white cloths filled the floor. Each one had a cheesy sign in the middle. Table 3, Debate Club. Table 7, Prom Court. Table 12, Drama Kids. I didn't belong to any of those groups. Never did. There was a table tucked near the restrooms behind a support column. No decorations, no nameplate, just a few empty chairs and a half-filled water pitcher. I made my way there and sat down. I watched the room fill. People arrived in clusters, squealing and hugging and snapping selfies. Some looked exactly the same. Others had softened, wrinkled, grown bellies or greyed hair. I recognized more faces than I expected. None of them looked at me twice. At one point, a guy walked by tall, thinning hairdress shirts, straining at the buttons. He slowed down as he passed my table and looked at my name tag. "Oh, Harper's sister, right, didn't know she had a twin." "We're not twins," I said. He gave me a quick smile and wandered off. I poured myself some water and took a sip. Still, no one joined my table. After a while, the MC took the stage microphone in hand. "All right, class of 2005, he said, full of fake pep. "Let's celebrate 20 amazing years." A video montage started on the big projector screen. Upbeat music played as pictures flashed by weddings, babies, career wins, charity work vacations to Europe. People clapped for themselves and each other. It was loud, warm, familiar. Then Harper's face appeared. The clapping turned into applause. Whistles, phones came out. "Let's hear it for Harper Shaw," the MC called out. "Community leader, podcast host, media personality, and a recent feature in Women Who Inspire." She wasn't even in the room yet. People stood up. The applause stretched long enough that I wondered if the video was set on loop. I stayed seated. I didn't clap. I watched from the back, invisible as usual. Next to the bathrooms across from the trash bins, I watched them cheer for my little sister. There was a time I thought being useful would be enough. I got into West Point, graduated near the top, deployed 3 times, led teams, saved lives. None of that made the slideshow. No one clapped for it. At this school, I was the quiet one, the serious one, the one who didn't go to prom. I did extra credit while Harper filmed makeup tutorials in our bedroom. When I won the state math scholarship, my mum missed the ceremony. She was planning Harper's birthday. When I got accepted into West Point, my mum said, "Wow, honey, that sounds intense, but not very feminine, is it?" Harper gave a speech at graduation. My mum live-streamed it. I learned early to stop expecting the spotlight. I thought being strong meant you didn't need recognition. That if you just worked hard enough, someone would notice eventually. But they didn't. That night, in that gym full of old classmates and sparkling lights, I realized something: they didn't forget me. They never saw me in the first place. The MC tapped the mic again. "Everyone, she's here. Let's welcome Harper." People turned to the doors. Cheers erupted. I stayed seated, sipping my water alone at the table near the restrooms. This party wasn't for me, and as I watched the crowd, my mind drifted back to a childhood where I'd slowly learned that being useful wasn't the same as being celebrated. I wasn't always the quiet older sister. I was born into a family that didn't have much dad, fresh out of the military, mum working nights at a call centre, struggling to pay the rent. Then I came along the first child. Mum had been studying law, determined to clear her own path, but she dropped out when she found out she was pregnant. I was born early, and I watched my mother trade her books for bottles deadlines for diaper changes. From the start, I knew what I had to do. I learned how to fold laundry neatly enough to pass inspection. I cooked simple meals and cleaned up after myself by the time I was 10. I didn't complain. I held back tears. I stayed out of the spotlight because someone had to be steady and someone had to hold everything together. Then Harper came along 5 years later and everything changed. Dad had a steady job, Mum didn't have to work weekends anymore. We moved into a house that had rooms for birthdays, for parties, for cameras. Harper filled every space. With her wide smile, her loud laugh, her ability to make friends anywhere she went, she brought colour back into Mum's life. I think my mother remembered what college had felt like, what career ambitions once burned in her chest, and she saw all of that again when she watched Harper spin around in a cheerleading uniform. Harper was a second chance at being young again. Mum started posting photos of Harper online, cheering, at games, smiling at crowds, speaking into microphones, at school events. She was proud and she wanted everyone to be proud. I was proud too. Of course I was. But they never posted my math trophy. They never live-streamed when I gave my calculus presentation. They never bragged about my acceptance to West Point. You know, the thing is, my choice is West Point, an ROTC scholarship, advanced mathematics, leadership awards. None of those things made good photo opportunities. They made quiet sacrifices. They don't scream, "Look at me." So nobody took notice when I graduated second in my class. Nobody took notice when I got accepted into one of the toughest military academies in the country. I remember calling home to tell Mum about West Point. The phone rang once before she picked up. I heard birthday party music blasting in the background. She sounded tired. "That's great, Evelyn," she said, low and distant. "That sounds intense. It's just so rigorous. And not very feminine, don't you think?" I paused. "Mum, it's a scholarship." "I know, honey," she said softly. The music got louder behind her. "It's wonderful, just not very ladylike." I didn't argue. I didn't chase her approval. I told myself I didn't need it because I was strong. I reminded myself of what Dad always said, "You were built tougher than this world." That was his way of praising me without words. But I remember standing at the scholarship award ceremony, all those families cheering, hugging their kids. I looked out at the crowd, no family there to clap for me. No smiling mother, no proud father with tear-filled eyes. Just strangers cheering for my face on the screen. And I buried my disappointment. There was another moment, my high school math award. I stayed late studying for it, sacrificing weekends to tutor classmates. I left graduation early, not because I didn't belong, but because I'd already missed my ceremony. Mum was at the venue next door, throwing Harper's Sweet 16. Another big, round dress, more cameras, a cake that looked like it belonged on TV. Later, when I showed her my trophy, she smiled without enthusiasm. "You're strong, Evelyn," she said. "You don't need applause. That's been the theme of my life. Be strong. Don't complain. Don't ask for attention." One evening, I overheard her talking to my aunt on the phone. She said Harper makes people smile. But Evelyn? She makes people think too hard. I almost dropped the laundry basket. Imagine hearing that from your own mother. Harper's bubbly and charming makes people happy. I was too serious, too heavy. That's why we don't post her scholarship online. Doesn't match our brand. I loved my mother, but it felt like my accomplishments belonged to someone else's narrative. They were always quietly admired, never loud enough to be shared. Dad was different. He was quiet, stern, a retired Marine. He didn't wear his emotions on his sleeve, but I used to try memorizing Morse code at 9 so I could say, "I love you" in secret letters. He looked up from his toolbox and said, "Good job." That was it. No hug, no smile, just, "Good job." When I got into West Point, I dropped the letter on his desk. He read it, then said expected. Not, "I'm proud," just expected. I tried to see it as pride in disguise, but there was a distance there, like he already knew I'd do it. I told myself that was enough, that his unspoken approval was better than anything. But after a while, I began to wonder why I needed to be expected to be great. Why couldn't greatness be celebrated? My childhood wasn't filled with arguments or obvious neglect. It was filled with obligations, comparisons, and a family that loved me but only on their terms. Harper needed to be seen. I needed to be useful. And that was enough for them. Until I showed up at my reunion, tagged as Harper's sister, and felt invisible all over again. I know they didn't mean to tear me down. They just never built me up in a way anyone could see. My strength was silent, but silent doesn't mean it doesn't make noise. I grew up under expectations and silent admiration buried under pretty birthdays and cheerful smiles. I needed people to see me, and a lot of my life nobody bothered. That night in the gym, I overheard everything. I caught the words as I washed my hands in that crowded bathroom. Evelyn. "Oh, the silent general who even is..." She... A laugh quiet but sharp. "Looks like she's trying too hard. Too serious." Another voice chimed in, loud with mock sympathy. "She's probably single career-oriented. Maybe she thinks a uniform is better company than a partner." I felt hot air swirl around my face, but I didn't respond. I just stood there a moment longer, staring at the reflection of someone I barely recognized, the reflection of a girl who was always too much for them. They didn't know what too much meant. They didn't remember the first deployment where I lost my commander, Tim Reynolds, my mentor, my friend. I still remember the way he looked at me, not as a young lieutenant, but as someone he trusted with his life. He said, "Lead them on, Evelyn. Don't stop." I made that promise again in that bathroom mirror, straightening my shoulders as if I could pull his voice back even for a second. I turned away without meeting any of their eyes. I heard the soft gasp of surprise when no one called after me. But I didn't stop. I walked out through a side door I knew only I would find my footsteps steady over the linoleum. I passed the servers mixing drinks, the girls in heels adjusting their dresses, the people still laughing about nothing. None of them saw me go. And that's exactly how I wanted it. Outside, the chill of the night settled on my skin. I took a breath, tasting freedom between the smoke of flowers and lawn sprinklers. My dress, simple and dark, hid something important, a device sewn into the seam at the base of my spine. It was compact, biometric locked, and explicitly not for reunions. But I was ready. 4 digits half meaningless to anyone else. I pressed it. A quiet beep. A voice in my ear, synthetic but commanding, biometric confirmed. Major General Shaw. Red priority. My pulse steadied. The device was cold against my skin, but it felt like warmth. The warmth of belonging to something real, something that mattered. I walked toward the tree line behind the gym. Lights, floodlights flickered across the grass. Someone must have alerted security. Guaranteed screens were on phones inside. I remembered the projection on the gym wall a minute ago, the highlight reel showing faces I'd never seen, winners, influencers, couples, families. Not a single photo of me. Then I heard it a low hum, far above, spiked into the night. The ground trembled in a steady pulse. Leaves cracked. I didn't flinch, I never did. I kept walking toward the tall grass that skirted the school grounds and opened up to empty lawn. The first chopper appeared as a dark shape, its spotlight cutting triangular paths over the grass. The second followed. I looked at the sky and saw the rotors sweeping an approaching storm of metal and mission. I stepped forward as the third helicopter descended its landing gear, touching down 40 feet away. Dust, leaves, a mini cyclone moving away from the center. A few steps later, the crew chief lowered the ramp and braced himself. He saluted and I stepped forward. His eyes widened when he saw me. He'd been one of my cadets. He'd seen me push through months of training, smoke-filled drills, long nights at West Point. Now he carried the weight of that recognition in his salute. "Madam, General," he said, voice steady, clipped. "No hesitation. We need you." The words carried through the rotor wash 70 decibels of desperate calm. I inhaled. I could hear the shuffle of feet behind me, classmates stepping back, eyes wide in disbelief. I could hear one child gasp. "Is she real?" I couldn't see the phones, but I knew they were recording. Live. Viral. But I didn't look at them. I looked at him and I nodded. That was enough. No applause, no tears, just purpose. The helicopter crew waited. Not a single breath left the moment. Someone must have told security it was authorized. Lights in the gym went dark as the crowd stared toward the back lawn. I took my first step toward the chopper wind, knocking my hair against my face. I let the light swirl around me as the crew chief reached out to assist me by the hand. I recognized the caution in his eyes. He believed in me. Not in rumors, not applause, not nostalgia. In me. I mounted the ramp. The rear door closed behind me with a mechanical click. The rotor slowed. The world I left behind the gym, the whispers, the handshakes became smaller. I looked back once at the lights fading through dust. They watched me go, but they didn't follow. As the helicopter lifted, I leaned forward and looked out at the darkening tree line. No more faces, no more doubt. My silence hadn't shielded me from being invisible. It had forged me to be seen here in the open air, on a mission that mattered. I exhaled. My strength had spoken louder than any cheer. The helicopter descended its rotors, beating the night sky like a call to attention. Dust swirled around us, lifting gravel from the driveway. Fairy lights shook overhead, and the polished resort grass rippled under the sudden pulse of wind. Security, briefed minutes ago, formed a neat circle, flashlights cutting through the dust. I felt every eye on me prickling against my skin as though I were glass. A shift in the crowd. Children stumbled away, parents pulling them back. One small voice clear against the chaos. "Mom, is that a superhero?" A giggle followed. I barely reacted. I'd been called worse. The skids touched ground blades, grinding louder before slowing. Phones lit up screens aimed my way. A stranger snapped a photo. Another began live streaming. Their captions appeared mid-fall. "Helicopter at class reunion. Party na stochi shu Madam General lands in style." The irony of it struck me. Everyone outside the rotor wash thought this was spectacle. They didn't know it was duty. The door of the chopper hissed open. I shielded my eyes against the dust and lights. The man who stepped out was instantly recognizable, Mike Sullivan. He stood tall, crisp military posture, just like he did at JROTC drills I led in the dusty West Point parade ground. I remembered him as a young cadet, determined to prove himself. Now he wore command across his shoulders, insignia I'd earned whispering between us in recognition. "Ma'am," he called, stepping forward and saluting. His voice warm but firm carried over the hum. "Madam General Shaw, we need you." His words held more weight than applause ever could. No fluff, no show, just truth. He wasn't here for photographs or accolades. He'd come because someone needed leadership, my leadership. The title felt heavy on my ears, yet I welcomed it. It was who I'd become. All cameras levelled at us. A hush descended over the crowd. I straightened, gripping my dress where the hidden communicator and badge waited in the lining. I didn't raise my hand to wave. I didn't offer a smile. I only walked forward step by step towards Sullivan. Each footfall was deliberate, less to announce myself, more to remind myself I belonged. A voice behind me, low, hesitant, cut through the hush. It was Jackson, the same guy who mocked me earlier. He stood rigid dust, settling in his hair. He avoided eye contact until I approached. Then softly he asked, I thought you were distant, always serious. But how can anyone hold that presence? Without screaming for it, I paused. His question didn't need loud answers. It needed honesty. You don't need to shout to be heard, I said quietly. Presence isn't about volume. It's about purpose. He nodded, swallowing. No cheering, just understanding, the kind that shifts something inside you. Behind me, Sullivan relayed updates. Situation escalated. We've got compromised intel. Protocol Alpha engaged. No question. No hesitation. My steps led me toward the chopper's steps. Cameras captured every second the blade's arc behind me. The darkening sky, the action I'd trained for but never expected at a reunion. A high-definition camera from the media crowd zoomed in on my shoulder patches. Someone whispered, "That's real rank." Phones buzzed with excitement. Social feeds went wild. Madam General at reunion landing. She's real no PR. But I didn't look at them. I looked at Sullivan. "I'll brief on board," I said as I climbed. He saluted again and stepped aside. The doors began to close behind me. As I sat, eyes forward, transmissions filling my earpiece, the crowd faded under rotor wash. I glimpsed Jackson, not cheering, not clapping, but silent head, bowed in a way I recognized as respect. The chopper lifted steadily. My boots were inside, but my presence stayed turned toward them. In that upward motion, something changed, not just for me, but for them too. They'd been blinded by preconceptions. The sky had given them a wake-up, but the world didn't pause to reflect. Hours after I touched down, I found Harper's podcast on every feed, titled something like, "Behind the Uniform, What Evelyn Shaw Won't Tell You." I didn't want details yet. I clicked. Her voice was familiar, polished. "You know, Evelyn," she began, "top military general, national hero. But here's what you don't see, that she dropped into this crowded class event with her status expecting applause. We all loved her sister, but this feels showy. Is she really the hero, or is she performing?" Every word hit like a stone. It wasn't just family talking, it was a public question. And immediately, the comments section ignited. Some defended me. Many echoed the doubt, "Show up by helicopter sound staged. Are military heroes the new celebrities?" One even formed a group called Fight Fake Generals, dedicated to exposing phony officers, and they mailed me a certified letter threatening legal action if I didn't prove my deployment records and official orders. I opened it at base headquarters. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from shock. A lawsuit for false military claims from strangers for being me. The next morning, my inbox was flooded with internal memos. HR flagged Harper's podcast. Command wanted me to respond. Investigators questioned me. "Miss Shaw, can you verify the mission on which you landed today? Wasn't that a private event?" Possibly civilian. They asked about the request channels. They asked if I'd misled anyone. I answered clearly. My orders were signed by command. Mission was real, an operational security briefing requiring on-site presence at the resort. They asked for logs. I provided them. But Whisper Network started. Maybe she cut corners. Maybe she used rank to blow smoke. That evening, a national news show started running a replay of the helicopter. They paused it frame by frame, not to highlight me, but to question my boots, the uniform polish, whether the fashion backing invalidated the mission. Complex military lingo flew across captions, anachronistic insignia mismatch, timing doesn't match protocol. My reputation felt like sand slipping through fingers. And overnight, I felt something I'd never felt before on shore. My silence, my discipline had been weaponized against me. They said I was arrogant, attention-seeking. I had always believed quiet strength couldn't be twisted. Now it was. Late that night, my secure email pinged, "Harper needs to talk." She called not to apologize, but to frame it as mutual PR damage control. Her voice sounded distant, rehearsed. I didn't mean it like that, but it got clicks. I have teams drafting scripts to "I said nothing," because past actions don't retract ease with a formal apology. I realized the fight had shifted from proving how I earned that helicopter to proving I belong in my own story. Lens by lens, her words had reshaped me from respected officer to spectacle. My silence fell on deaf ears. "Where's your voice, General?" I knew I had to regain it, not with noise, but with facts. So I reached out to the task force that coordinated the mission. I asked Captain Reyes to confirm that footage from onboard drones showed my presence and a convoy evac under live fire conditions. I emailed base logs. I arranged for the mission files to be shared with the internal board. I didn't tweet. I didn't make video clips. I simply released everything: documents, GPS logs, chain of command orders in a secure drop to military PR. Let them replicate it leaked if they chose. Let substance speak where silence failed. Within 24 hours, the same channels that ripped me started posting raw documents Evelyn's deployment confirmed. Helicopter landings verified. Even Fight Fake Generals shut down after its members received their own letters, showing I had never lied. But damage lingered. Harper's podcast episodes continued defending herself. I'm just raising questions. But a new wave emerged. Those defending quiet competence began trending. Shut, let her speak, shut your facts first. I didn't celebrate. I remembered Mike Sullivan's words, "We need you." I'd stood when they doubted. Now I stood again, this time in civilian view, with my entire record laid bare. Because what I needed wasn't applause or silence, it was acknowledgement. Just acknowledgement. Later, after the dust settled, Harper came to see me not with media teams, but alone. She caught me between briefings. Her eyes had no script. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," she said softly. "I thought silence meant retreat." I said, "Silence doesn't mean compliance." She looked at me. Then, "I'm sorry." That apology didn't fix months of distance, but it was the moment words finally matched truth. I nodded. "You don't need to explain. Just stop." And with that, the chapter shifted again away from helicopter talk, away from online doubt, into something quieter, but deeper. I woke the next morning to an uneasy calm. My apartment felt too still, as if waiting on what came next. The folder Linda and Jason had left on my kitchen counter lay open unread, as if showing me it was time. I took a deep breath and sat down. Linda's message echoed. I remembered what it felt like to be erased. I couldn't let that happen to you. And Jason, that strength, scared me. Both had torn down their own walls to stand with me. That meant something. I read through every single digital timestamp, every login entry. Each one showed Harper's username replacing mine, commandeering my identity piece by piece. Deployments vanished. Medals disappeared. Even my highest honor, Operation Sentinel, was scratched out, replaced with her name and photo. She didn't just erase me. She stamped herself into my life. A memory flashed. I was in Kandahar Communications, buzzing fingers cold on the keyboard as I sent coordinates. Harper tweeted about a gala in New York. When I got home 6 months later, I discovered she'd updated our mother's address to say I was safe at home. I didn't tell anyone. I thought it was just a mistake. Now I saw it was deliberate. I sank onto the kitchen stool, exhaling slowly. The gravity of her betrayal settled in. This wasn't sibling rivalry, this was identity theft, but carried out in silence behind closed doors, and with the people I trusted believing the lie. I texted Linda, "Can we meet?" She responded within minutes. Then, "Jason, I'll come too." Later that afternoon, we met at a quiet cafe. Linda brought documents, screenshots of Harper's family access credentials, archived versions of my profile emails from the alumni office, notifying Evelyn Shaw's profile updated by Harper Shaw. Jason brought a USB drive, a copy of my military record, before and after Harper's edits. Every line told a story of erasure. I traced the glowing edge of the folder with my fingertip, the light trembled on the laminated pages. I looked at both of them. Linda's eyes brimmed with concern, Jason's posture tight from guilt and relief. She used her power of attorney. Linda explained signed paperwork when your deployment records were being updated. That gave her access to the military databases. Jason sighed. I never wanted to be part of this. But after I left, I started following your deployments online. I was proud of you. And then I saw the edits, everything removed, your name gone. I thought I'd been wrong about you, but I was wrong about her. My throat tightened, not because they discovered the truth, but because they knew me. They knew what those medals meant. They knew what I'd given. We sat in silence for a long time. I stared out the window at the people crossing the street, unaware of what was unfolding here. It struck me my accomplishments weren't supported by adoring crowds. They needed witnesses. And now I had them. I brought the folder home, spent a night drafting emails to the Alumni Association, the Military Records Department Public Affairs, meticulously stripping out Harper's name, reinstating mine, attaching proof. I wrote in a steady hand, "Attached is evidence of unauthorized alterations to Lieutenant Evelyn Shaw's official records. I request immediate review and restoration of all documentation bearing my name as well as confirmation of accuracy to associated honours and deployments." Meeting after meeting followed. A colonel who mentored me spoke in my favour. An IT officer went through logs and confirmed the unauthorised access. I learned that even in silence, records spoke. 2 weeks later, I walked into the office to see my reinstated citation framed on the wall. Names I thought were erased restored. My deployments listed accurately. Even a nameplate with Lieutenant Evelyn Shaw returned to its rightful place. A quiet vindication. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A brief text from Linda, "You weren't misfiled. You were just hidden and now you're back." Jason called. We didn't need to say much. I heard admiration, relief, regret. For the first time in a long time, I slept without the weight of everything feeling unreal. The truth was no longer something I had to carry alone. In the silence afterward, I realized something fundamental. Standing up for yourself doesn't have to be loud. It just needs to be honest and have witnesses. You don't have to shout truth into a void. You just need to show up and let the record speak. 2 days later, I stood outside a grand hall filled with uniformed officers, veterans, and polished oak decor. It was the Legacy of Valor ceremony, an invitation-only event honouring those who'd served with distinction. I hadn't been on the list officially. I wasn't invited. But I showed up anyway, because showing up was part of the record. My invitation arrived a week ago, anonymously mailed to my P.O. box. It was simple, my rank, my name, a date, and location, and the phrase, "By request of Colonel Marcus Tate, in honour of your service." Colonel Tate had been my old mentor before he passed away last year. His widow must have arranged it, part of his final wishes. I didn't question it. Someone believed I deserved to be there. I owed them that much. As I approached the entrance, I held my ID and the invitation in one hand. A uniformed guard stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, you're not on the guest list. May I ask your name?" I handed over my invitation and my military ID without hesitation. I watched his eyes flick between the two documents and my face. He frowned. "Please, wait here." I stood perfectly still, shoulders squared, heart steady. I had been through worse than scrutiny felt heavier. Older veterans in crisp caps passed by, greeting each other like old friends. The crowd murmured hushed tones of anticipation for the ceremony inside. After 2 minutes, maybe 3, the guard motioned for me. "Follow me, ma'am." We passed through double doors into a hallway lined with portraits of decorated officers. I recognized Colonel Tate's image, older, stern, kind-eyed. I paused a moment to look at him, felt a swell of gratitude. He had always believed I could stand among the best. The guard led me to the back of the auditorium, where I slipped into a seat near the aisle. A few heads turned. Someone whispered, "Is that?" Others leaned in. "That's Evelyn Shaw." A junior officer 2 rows in front of me nudged his colleague. "I heard she wasn't supposed to be here." Colleague shrugged and whispered, "Looks like they let her in anyway." A hush fell as the ceremony began. Speeches honoured forgotten heroes, unsung sacrifices. Then, when it came time to add names back onto the memorial plaque, the curator called out Lieutenant Evelyn Shaw. A staff member held up a spotlight illuminating the stage where I'd soon stand. My chest tightened. I would go up. No grand introduction, no fanfare, just the invitation, my presence, and the name they'd finally remembered belonged here. The doors near the stage opened and I stood. I walked toward the light. Veterans stood, applause rippled. Among them were familiar faces from the academy, some nodding, others silent. I spotted one of my old teachers, Principal Martin, whose gaze flicked away as I passed. He'd taught me at JROTC. There were no smiles, no recognition, just polite distance. I'd expected less. At the podium, I pinned the nameplate onto the plaque. I felt the cold metal under my fingers. The tradition was to say a few words, but I didn't need to. My eyes scanned the room. My lips didn't move. The moment was mine as much as anyone's. A student too young to have known me in person stood nearby, gazing as wide-eyed as a child seeing a hero. With a soft whisper, they said to their parent, "Is she a real hero?" The parent nodded. I heard the question. It mattered. Applause rose again. I silently stepped back, walking down the aisle. That's when he appeared, the student. He looked at me and asked quietly, "Will you say something?" Just one sentence. I hesitated, then nodded. Reaching into my coat, I took a small card. Colonel Tate's note that had come with the invite. "You belong." I held it up. The student's eyes lit up at the sight of that line. A smile flickered at the edges of their mouth. They got it. I nodded, whispered, "Thank you," and returned to my seat. There was no grand speech, no dramatic flourish. Just that "thank you for inviting me." It was enough. After the ceremony, people approached me. Some veterans shook my hand. One older woman, grey hair and soft uniform, said, "We missed you being here." A few students gathered around to ask questions, not to praise, but to learn. "How did you cope?" they asked. "What did you feel when no one saw you?" I answered plainly. I kept working, I kept going. I believed my purpose mattered, even if no one else did. They nodded, as if they understood. Outside, under the glow of porch lights, a young lieutenant saluted. "Lieutenant Shaw," he paused. "Your story? It's already inspiring us." Behind him I noticed Principal Martin nameplate still pinned on the plaque, turning back to study my path. He didn't approach, he didn't clap. But when I caught his eye, I saw respect there. That was enough. I left without fanfare, slipping into the night. The invitation had been anonymous, but it was more than a ticket, it was a shift. I hadn't needed them to remember me loudly. I just needed to show up where it mattered. Because sometimes the loudest statement is a quiet return. I stepped onto the stage at the Academy's hall. Legacy of Valor night, not as Harper's sister, not as that hard-nosed general, but as Evelyn Shaw. No crowd-pleasing entrance, no dramatic music. I walked in steady shoulders, squared chin up. The audience quieted immediately. I could see the young cadets whispering, "Is that her?" Their eyes were wide, curious, maybe a little awed. For the first time, they weren't questioning if I was real, they were listening to why I was. I cleared my throat. No microphones. My voice carried naturally. 2 years ago, I lost my squad leader in an ambush. He was the kind of man people followed without question. We were pinned down. He yelled, "Fall back." I hesitated because I'd been trained to stand firm. He spotted me. He looked right in my eyes through the dust and smoke, and he pointed to the meds kit at my belt. "Take care of them," he said. And then he gave his life so I could get them out. I paused, thinking how clean the room was. Now dimmed lights and polished wood, unlike the broken shock of that day. I didn't break. I didn't cry. I didn't call that moment a tragedy. I called it what it was, a duty to live and to bear witness. I straightened my spine. So I'm not here asking for your mercy or your applause. I'm here so that they're remembered, the people whose names aren't on banners, whose faces aren't in highlight reels. We owe them more than silence. A single student raised his phone and live streamed. The camera angle captured me steady, not tearing up, voice resolute. That live stream would soon get thousands of views, sharing the story, raw, real. The woman who organised the event, Ms. Jenkins, stood in the back. I saw her eyes well up. Later, she told me I should have done this years ago. She stepped forward and quietly said, "I'm sorry. You deserved a party tonight." She meant the reunion. But this was the moment that mattered. She had unsnapped the label that misfiled me. Students came forward one after another to shake my hand. They didn't ask for selfies. They didn't ask what I wore or who I was related to. They asked for details. What was his name? What did he say before he died? How did I carry on, I told them, because I realised that this is what lasting respect feels like. Not cheers, not fame, responsibility. A young cadet, barely 18, asked, "How do you keep going after someone dies like that?" I met his eyes, because they believed in me, and I promised not to let their sacrifice mean nothing. His lip trembled, not because he was sad, but because he felt the weight of that vow. He understood. The event ended with a moment of silence. Not staged. Not enforced. Just breath held. I heard sniffles. I felt heavier than any medal I ever earned, but lighter too because it was the first time I felt heard. Afterward, a group of cadets crowded around me. They wrote a letter on the spot, a pledge really to honour their fallen peers in the same way. They hadn't asked me to sign it. They said, "We're doing this because you showed us how." I signed, but it felt like I was just one of many taking action now. Later in the night, I stepped outside. The Academy's flagpole towered above American flag waving. I stood alone, quiet. No applause, no selfies. Just me remembering him, remembering all of them. I pressed my palm to the cold stone memorial. A tear rolled down, not for sympathy, but for connection, for closure. I whispered, "I'm listening." I walked back in and no one stopped me. I didn't crave recognition. I just wanted the space to stand in truth. That's when I understood sometimes you don't need a spotlight. You need to be an example, to break the pattern of being ignored or dismissed. I didn't need them to say they were sorry. I needed them to vow not to forget. The next morning, someone posted the live stream clip online with a caption. Her voice was quiet, but her words shook the room. Comments poured in, so moving. Finally, someone who sees military women, "I'm proud to be a cadet here." I scrolled through and realised they didn't see me because they chose not to. That night, they chose to. I didn't climb any stage after. I didn't give another speech. I didn't boast. I walked off quietly, sneakers on polished floor, head held high. I left behind a memory, they left behind a promise. Because sometimes you don't need to prove you exist. You just need to stop being erased. The morning they re-engraved my name on the honour wall, it was raining. Not the kind of storm that forces people inside, but a soft, persistent drizzle like the sky couldn't quite decide whether it was morning or simply trying to clean something old. I stood beneath a borrowed black umbrella watching the stonemason work. His movements were careful, practiced, reverent. The chisel struck with quiet precision. He paused, once looked at me and said, "I've done this for 30 years. I've etched generals, heroes, legends, but I've never seen someone stand so still for so long before the first letter." I didn't answer. I wasn't counting the minutes. I was listening. To the rain, to the chisel, to the quiet breath of a name finally being returned to the space it belonged. It wasn't for display. It wasn't for apology. It was for truth. The school had issued a statement a week earlier, a formal acknowledgement signed by the headmaster and co-signed by the Veterans Alliance. They called it an administrative oversight that my name had been excluded from the wall due to a misfiled record during a system transfer. Not a lie, but not the truth either. The real reason had been silence. Mine and theirs. No one knew how to categorize someone like me. Too visible to ignore. Too complicated to celebrate. The crowd that gathered wasn't large. A few faculty, some cadets. One woman wore a scarf in the school's navy and gold colours and held her daughter's hand as they watched. A younger cadet near the back recorded the moment on his phone. A soft click as the final letter of my name was etched into stone. Evelyn M. Shaw, Lieutenant General, Valor Division, years served 23. Someone clapped. Then another. But it wasn't a ceremony. It wasn't a performance. It was a correction. Later that week, I received letters. Not many, but the kind that didn't use emojis or signatures with hearts. One came from a freshman cadet who'd seen the live stream. They said, "You spoke without words," he wrote. "But I think I heard you louder than anyone else. Thank you for reminding me that quiet isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy." Another letter came from the Veterans Office. Hand-signed, no form letter. "We regret the delay. We acknowledge the cost." That was all. No excuses. Just wait. At home, I placed the letters in a box beside my father's old field cap. I hadn't opened that box in years. Inside was a photograph of me at 11, standing too straight in an oversized cadet uniform trying to earn his nod. That day, I hadn't. But I kept the photo anyway. Because even if he never said it, I know now he watched every step. The truth is, I didn't need the engraving. I didn't need the letters. But I needed the world to stop pretending I hadn't existed. Restoring honour isn't about rewriting history. It's about telling it right the second time, without fanfare, without erasure, just facts placed back where they belong. As the rain tapered off and the crowd slowly dispersed, one of the cadets approached me. She looked no older than 20, with a hard line of purpose in her eyes, and a softness she tried to hide in her posture. "Ma'am," she said, and her voice wavered just enough to betray emotion. "I read your file, the full one, not the school's version, yours. I wanted to say, thank you." I nodded, unsure what to say. She looked over at the wall, at the letters still wet from the rain. "One day, I hope someone stands this still for my name," she added. "They will," I told her, "if you stand for something that matters, and if you stand long enough." That's the thing about being erased. It doesn't always happen violently. Sometimes it's just a mission. And the only way to fight it isn't with anger. It's with endurance. I left the campus with no speech, no press. Just the sound of rain drying on stone and the knowledge that this time when people walked past that wall, they'd see a name that had once been missing. And maybe they'd ask why. Because honour doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to be bought or defended or wrapped in medals. Sometimes all it needs is to be remembered right. I found Harper at our old favourite cafe, the one with the chipped blue tiles and mismatched chairs, where we spent countless afternoons as teens. I arrived, first pulled out a chair, and watched her through the window before she spotted me. She paused, like she wasn't sure she had permission to come inside. When she walked up, she carried her old notebook, soft leather spine cracked with pages filled with handwriting from years ago. I wasn't sure what to expect. Remorse. Relief. Something else entirely. "Hey," she said finally, voice low. "Hey," I answered, slipping my fingers around a cup of black coffee. No sugar, no milk. Same as always. She sat down across from me, placed the notebook on the table, and took a shaky breath. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and I could rent the past out in that space. "You were right," Harper said, her voice catching. I never understood how deep this went. Not until I saw them engraving your name. Until I heard those cadets talking. Until I read that freshman's letter. I watched her open the notebook. The pages were full of doodles, half-finished sentences, crossed-out confessions. I recognized her handwriting. The same looping H's, the same way some words were too big, others too small, like she was trying to crowd meaning into each line. She flipped to a dated entry June, right before graduation. She read aloud, voice cracking, "I'm happy for E, but sometimes I hate her. She's so sure of herself. So serious. I feel like I should be proud she did so well. But she makes me look small. And that scares me." She closed the book and looked up. I was terrified. Of being second best, of being forgotten. "I love you, Eve. I did then. But I didn't want to be the shadow. So I stole the spotlight piece by piece. Her words sliced through years of silent pain. I'd never expected that level of honesty. Not so raw. Why now? I asked quietly. Why bring this up? Because I kept thinking, if I don't face it, I'll keep running from it. And I don't want to run anymore. She paused. "I'm sorry. For every time I edited your story. For every time I let the crowd choose me over you. For being too afraid to say it back then." Tears glistened in her eyes. I felt something shift, not forgiveness yet, but the earliest form of it, understanding. We sat in silence for a moment. The barista refilled our coffees without us noticing. Outside, the afternoon light softened. The weight in the room lightened too. Then Harper slid the notebook across the table. "I thought you should keep it." I glanced at it, then back at her. Why? Because those words, they're part of both our stories. And maybe they explain why I was always so loud. Because I didn't want to be quiet. She swallowed. "And I'm tired of shouting." I closed the notebook, took a steadying breath, and said, "I don't need an apology. I need you to stay, to sit across from me like this. Honesty is more than words, it's actions." She nodded. "Then I will. I will stay." We left the cafe and walked to the park across the street, where we used to climb trees, whisper secrets. She bought an ice cream chocolate and I got mine plain vanilla. 1 scoop each, very quiet. As we sat on the bench, her cone half melted in the heat, she asked, "Can we try something?" "No expectations. Just sisters." "Okay," I said. She exhaled as, "I'm sorry I was jealous. I'm sorry I made your successes feel like my failures. I'm sorry I didn't realize your silence was your strength." I took her hand. "And I'm sorry I didn't let you in. I thought I could do it alone. I thought needing someone was weakness. I was wrong. The ice cream dripped between us, but we didn't notice. It was sweet, messy, grounded. We stayed until the sun began to dip, laughing at old jokes, sharing new fears. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the shadow behind her. She wasn't the spotlight without me. Maybe healing doesn't require grand gestures. Maybe it just takes showing up, over and over, even when it hurts. "Rebuild?" she asked quietly as we stood to leave. I nodded. Together. The offer came in a sealed envelope slid under my office door at 5:43 a.m. A promotion full-star General Overseas Command. The kind of position people dream of. The kind of rank that changes your name in rooms you'll never walk into. I read it twice, then folded it back neat and square. I didn't call anyone. I didn't celebrate. I just let the silence in my quarters answer for me. Because this time I wasn't moving forward to be seen. I was choosing to stay because I had already seen enough. At the academy, my days began before sunrise. I ran drills with cadets too green to know when to speak and when to hold back. I stood beside them in the bitter wind, correcting stances, adjusting grips, watching how they held failure in their hands. Not all of them understood discipline, not at first. But they learned. Not because I shouted, but because I watched. And they felt it. The stillness of someone who had carried more than just orders. They called me the ghost. General half joke, half awe, I didn't correct them. In quiet moments between classes, I'd sit in the back of the mess hall boots, dusty fingers wrapped around a black coffee, and just watch. There was a cadence to the academy shouts, laughter metal against gravel. But in that chaos I saw what I never had at their age, someone like me. Someone who didn't need applause to matter. One evening after drills, a cadet named Rachel lingered outside my office. She was 19, sharp-edged but smart. She had failed her leadership review. Twice. I thought she'd asked to transfer. Instead, she handed me a folded note and left without a word. It read, "You make me want to try again. Not because you believe in me, but because you make me believe in myself." It was the kind of message I would have buried when I was her age, dismissed it. But that night, I left it on my desk instead of locking it away. I didn't need the words, but maybe I needed the reminder that they existed. A month later, her mother wrote me an email, long a little rambling the way mothers write when they've been scared too long. She used to cry herself to sleep, it said. Now, she says, Colonel Shaw doesn't flinch, so I won't either. I don't know what you're doing out there, but thank you. I didn't know silence could lead. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I just printed it out and pinned it behind my locker beside an old photo of my own cadet days. In that photo, I was standing alone, chin up, hands behind my back, eyes searching. I remember how lost I'd felt, how badly I wanted someone to notice without being told to look. Now I was becoming that for others. And it didn't require rank. It required presence. I stayed through winter, through another round of evaluations, through days that started before the sun and ended without fanfare. There were no podiums, no headline features, no group photos. But there were moments, small, steady quiet, that stacked up into something real. A cadet once called me the Ghost General. I'd overheard it during a midnight inspection, said, half in jest, half in reverence. She's everywhere like a shadow. She never raises her voice, but when she walks past, you fix your posture without knowing why. They thought I didn't hear. I didn't correct them. I wore the nickname like a second uniform, because they were right. Leadership doesn't always wear rank on its chest. Sometimes it walks in silence, listens more than it speaks, and steps aside so others can stand taller. One afternoon, I watched a second-year cadet lead drills with the kind of quiet confidence I'd spent years crafting in myself. He didn't look back at me. He didn't need to. That was the point. I'd become the scaffolding, the steel no one sees beneath the structure. Years ago, I would have found that reality suffocating. Now, it felt like breath. I'd been offered command posts since overseas, even one at the Pentagon. I declined, not because I couldn't rise higher, but because I'd finally understood something no promotion could give me the power of staying to rebuild trust where it had been fractured, staying to model resilience without making speeches, staying to prove that legacy isn't about being remembered loudly, it's about being remembered by the right people, the kind who whisper your name when no one's watching, the kind who carry your discipline long after they've left your shadow. I walk through the quiet courtyard at dawn, the early light casting long shadows across the memorial wall. Today was the day I came to lay flowers at the plaque that should have borne my name all along. My steps were steady, each one a reminder of how far I'd travelled and of who I'd carried with me. I knelt before the polished marble hands steady and laid a simple bouquet of white lilies and red roses. I didn't read every name aloud. Instead, I knelt in solemn silence and allowed the wind to carry my respect across the etched faces. One of my cadets stepped forward to read Lieutenant Eva Shaw, deployed in support of Operation Blue Shield, lost her life-saving civilians under fire. He paused, then lifted his eyes to the assembled group. She led from the front. She carried us when we could not find our way. The sincerity in his voice settled like a warm pulse in my chest. Among the few attending were an instructor I once trained with, and across the small crowd I caught sight of a familiar face. The same young officer who'd spoken to me after the helicopter landing at the reunion. He stepped forward now with decisive strides. "General Shaw," he said softly, voice low, "you once taught me how to lead without controlling. I carry that lesson with me every day." He handed me a folded cloth, a worn but clean flag from his unit's ceremony, tucked inside a thin file. "It's yours, ma'am." I accepted it without a flicker of surprise. It felt right, the culmination of everything built in silence, every lesson unspoken yet understood. Later, under the same oak tree where Harper and I once shared childhood secrets, I opened the small wooden box my father had left behind. Inside, among the padded felt, lay a faded childhood photo, me at 10, standing at attention, in tiny fatigues, and a worn slip of paper folded neatly beneath it. In my own father's handwriting, "You made silence proud." I touched the paper and remembered how he used to say, "Real leaders don't need spotlights." His words weren't praise. They never were. But they were consistent, reliable, true. The phrase I would carve on his headstone later tonight. Because my father's silence had shaped me to carry storms, and now I learned to leave echoes. I closed my eyes and let a single tear fall, not for loss, but for understanding. He believed in me, just quietly, invisibly. Too quietly, perhaps, but enough. I spent the afternoon signing the final drafts of my memoir, The Silence That Led. It was raw, honest, a testament not to loud heroics, but whispered truths, to enduring, not raising banners. I dedicated the first copy to my father, to Harper, and to every cadet who learned to stand with less noise, but more heart. That evening, the book launch was simple. A small gathering under low lights, a few long-time colleagues, 2 or 3 mentors. My speech lasted less than 5 minutes. This is for the ones who led without expecting cheers. For the quiet ones who carried weight no one saw. I looked around and felt their faces shine with recognition. I don't need to be on the bestseller list. I need this story to matter, to remind people that sometimes the greatest values are found in the quiet corners, where no camera focuses, but where truth grows roots. Later, Harper hugged me backstage. She was proud and peaceful. Among the few words she said, "You built a world worth following." One quiet step at a time. If you'd like to explore Evelyn's journey deeper or see more stories like this, consider following the channel. I post reflections like this regularly, simple stories, strong voices. No need for spotlights. Just the truth.